wants to make an announcement, and following that, he'll do his opening statement, followed by the opening statement from Snake Was Right. So with that, very excited to have you here. Thanks so much for all your guys' love and encouragement too. It was a crazy tour. So we had some crazy stuff happen. Like we had to change a venue. And it was like we were at the start time. We were like, you know what, this is just not gonna work. There's no way. So we had to change a venue on one of the debates. Actually, twice we had to do that. That was crazy. So thanks so much for all of your support, folks. With that, I'm going to switch it over to Duncan Atheism for his opening statement and announcement, apparently. I have no idea what this is, folks. So I didn't screen the announcement, but first.
Well, I've been wanting to reveal this information for quite some time. I've debated about whether to reveal it or not. I knew it eventually would get out, and I didn't want to be misrepresented or distorted. I wanted to have the widest possible audience, and so people could hear from me rather than through the rumor mill. I've decided to come out of the closet and reveal who and what I really am. I am a part of the LGBT community. For some time now, I've been transitioning in my avatar and my screen name. I've been transitioning from Evolution False to Darwin's Deity to Darth Dawkins, Duncan Atheism, and tonight I will be making the final transition to demolishing atheism. I've decided to come out of the closet and reveal that I am no longer, I will be holding to a non-binary position. I no longer hold to the binary designation for humans of being atheist and theist. The atheist-theist binary is false. I totally reject the notion of atheist, dogmatic, God-denying bigotry and theophobia. It's as real as the Easter Bunny and the invisible sky fantasy. I now lack belief in the atheophobic reasoning and models of reality. So I wanted you to hear it from me first as being a part of the LGBT community, which is not the community that you're thinking of. It is the Elohim, which is a Hebrew word for God. Elohim, God believers in the Trinity, questioning God deniers community. So yes, I'm a part of that LGBT community, but not the other one. So we are part of the Elohim, God believers in the Trinity, questioning God deniers. So you heard it here first tonight. And that's my announcement about myself. My opening statement is that the God of Christianity has revealed himself in natural revelation and special revelation. He has revealed that he is the ground of all being and the ground of all knowledge, the ground of intelligibility. And the denial, the non-acceptance, which will amount to the denial thereof, will result in complete metaphysical absurdity. Now, nobody can be neutral about what is ultimate, let alone God. Now, some people will say they lack belief in God, but I'll demonstrate tonight that that is an indirect form of denial. So one will either have to accept the revelation of God, that he is the the unifying first principle that will provide for all human existence and intelligibility, or one will have to sit there in a state of absurdity, having no grounding for any of their assertions or statements of possibility. And that's it.
Thank you very much for that, Duncan. We will now switch it over to Snake's opening statement. We welcome you here, Snake, and the floor is all yours.
Thanks for having me. So I always find it funny that when people say that God has revealed himself, and apparently not to me, not to the majority of the human race, at least not your God. All these arguments usually go something along the lines of God exists because only God can account for what he's described here as the unifying first principle, or God is that unifying first principle, and only that can account for morality or absolute or fundamental truths, or intelligibility or logic, and logic and morality exist, therefore God exists. And all of these just assume the premise that X is only possible through God by assuming that there is no naturalistic explanation for them. There is no reason given for this baseless assumption that nature cannot explain them. And moreover, naturalism easily and obviously accounts for all those things like morality and fundamental absolute truths. And In fact, they must exist for any supernatural to exist. And I don't understand why the natural world needs a grounding, but the supernatural world doesn't need a grounding. Why don't you leap to the supernatural? So this unifying first principle, I'm willing to agree that there is one, but you can't establish that it is a God or a mind of any kind. In fact, gods must follow the rules of these unifying first principles in order for their minds to even exist. They must follow some outside code of morality in order to be considered good. You simply can't define God as good just because it's a God. Even the mind of God is contingent upon the rules that minds must follow, and a perfect mind must follow logic perfectly, at least. The fact that God is limited to a particular nature means that God is contingent upon whatever is making that nature coherent. My argument in a couple of words is God is dependent on rationality and not the other way around. Therefore, Duncan's arguments don't work because they depend on the untenable position that rationality is dependent upon God. And well, his position is rationality is dependent upon God, rationality exists, therefore God exists. But that first premise, rationality is dependent upon God, is absolutely false. And you simply cannot ground logic or intelligibility or morality in a God, or else you suffer from an appeal to authority and circular reasoning, which Duncan has admitted to previously. We'll see if he still stands by that. Now, a legitimate appeal to authority is appealing to an authority's expertise, and we can assume here God is correct about morality or whatever he's making pronouncements on, but that just means he's an expert in it. And all experts are merely studying phenomena outside of themselves. An expert in nuclear physics is just discovering the phenomena. Same with God's expertise, if God is right. And he's merely exploring how it works. But God himself is not the source of these things. He can only emerge from these fundamental truths. Just like the example I gave, a nuclear physicist is not the source of nuclear physics. He's merely understanding it. And so I'm going to go through a couple of syllogisms here. So presuppositionalism, I think, is basically what's going on here. And my first premise is faith alone can justify any belief. And he's only using faith for this, which we'll unpack later. Premise 2 is if God is good, then we need some way to confirm this in order to avoid worshiping evil or false gods. Premise 3, we already have to know what God good is in order to call God good. And so therefore, knowledge and morality precede knowledge of God. Faith is just not good enough. We have to have this standard outside to be able to test it. This would be important in analyzing whether the Bible, for example, is a document inspired by Satan. So either we can assume for no reason that it is inspired by Satan or inspired by God, or there's a standard by which we can hold the words of the Bible to. So just assuming that it's God's word, therefore it's true, does not solve the problem of whether or not it actually is God's word. And God's word, or anything claimed to be God's word, must be able to be independently verified. Otherwise, we just have to believe it on blind faith alone, which is not a reason to believe anything. My second syllogism is for the precedence of logic over belief in God as well. First premise is God cannot change fundamental objective truths like the laws of logic. Premise 2 is fundamental objective truths are true in all circumstances in all possible worlds, no matter what, and therefore God is influenced by these fundamental truths, or unifying first principles, as Duncan would say, and they are not influenced by God's. So I'd be interested to know how Christianity is well, first of all, I don't understand how you can get from a God exists to therefore Christianity is true and Jesus is God. But I'd also be interested to see how you can say that Christianity is a better moral or scientific standard from its supposed God, because of that ancient book that endorses slavery, rape, and genocide and has absolutely no knowledge of real science, especially diseases. So I don't see how you can say that God has revealed himself through the natural world when the Bible, the chief source of this revelation, is wrong on almost every level. And atheism is just the default whenever you can't establish the existence of a God. So that's my position. I don't believe anyone has established any existence of any God. So that's where I land. And I think we were talking beforehand. I think that is a position of neutrality. I have no bias. In fact, actually, I'll recant that. My bias, I would rather live in a world with a God, with a heaven. I don't believe it. I would rather have $1 million in my bank account. I don't believe it. I need evidence. So let's see. I would characterize his arguments as circular reasoning and trying to define God into existence rather than point to him with evidence. So why don't we just jump right in? That'll be my conclusion.
Thank you very much. Snake was right. We will now.
Are you done, James? Okay, you just dropped that. Okay, so let me just recap and make it clear that you are rejecting my position that the God of the Bible exists, and we know this in virtue of natural and special revelation. The natural revelation consists that all facts collectively and individually indicate God. We know that the seen indicates the unseen, and that will be eternal. And the eternal will have to be personal, otherwise we couldn't be personal. So that would be the basic issue that the natural world reveals God.
What does that mean?
That?
Eternal will have to be personal.
Well, I'm sure you believe that there are certain phenomenon that you do see indicates things that are unseen, like Wi-Fi or radio waves, right? Do you accept that?
Unseen by our naked eyes.
Are there unseen things that we cannot see that are indicated by the things that we do see?
Do you mean unseen as in naked human eyes, or not detectable?
I'm talking about our eyes, that there are things that we cannot see with our eyes that we infer or extrapolate that are there by what is seen.
No, we don't have to infer or extrapolate that wind or Wi-Fi exists.
Okay, you don't infer Wi-Fi?
No.
Oh, so you don't make any scientific inferences that there's an invisible wavelengths?
No, I can actually test it.
No, testing would involve an inferential process. Science is largely inferential and involves extrapolation. You are aware that science is almost largely inferential.
Not really.
No, science is inferential. Okay, because if you cannot see it, if you cannot touch, taste it, smell it, feel
an
it,
observation isn't an inference. Sorry.
An observation. All observations are inherently theory laden. Do you deny that?
Inherently theory laden.
Yes.
Explain that.
You're confusing sense datum, okay, sensory experience, with a cognitive, almost immediate conclusion from sense datum. So I don't want to belabor the point on this. So you reject the notion that all facts, individually and collectively, necessitate referencing God as the unifying first principle. Is that correct?
Of course.
Okay, and you reject also that the Christian scriptures as a complete package, as a complete system,
absolutely
detailing God's property and attribute set, each of which is made. May I finish, please? Okay, so the Bible details God's basic property set, such as that he is eternal, he is absolute, he is ultimate, he is omniscient, omnipotent, always truth revealing, and he has a sovereign plan. All of which you reject, that those are prerequisites for human intelligibility, and that they have not been provided to us by God in a self-attesting manner. So you reject that.
Yeah, you have yet to show any reason why I should believe that.
Okay, have you read the Bible?
Yeah, I've read the entire Bible more than once. Can I finish?
Mm-hmm.
The Bible is possibly the single worst reference for any of the thing that you're talking about.
Okay. Did you use your reason to come to that conclusion?
Yes.
Okay. And what is it that metaphysically, from a unifying first principle, that would ground any possibility or impossibility, such as your capacity to reason?
Are you asking what grounds reason?
No, I'm asking you, what is the unifying first principle? What is metaphysically primary in existence that prescribes all possibility, which would entail reason? Since it is not God.
Why is it God?
Okay.
Why is it God? That's your burden to prove. You have to prove that it's God.
I've already explained that.
Not even slightly.
Okay. I have
You've just
already
asserted
presented
it.
to you.
Hold on. I'm not done. You've merely asserted it. You have not explained why God is the grounding of it. You've just
Actually,
said he is.
Are you done?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, I did explain it, but you rejected the evidentiary and rational justification. You have rejected that. Now, what I'm asking
I didn't
you
hear
is,
any evidence.
man, okay. Well, actually, I did present it to you.
No, you didn't.
Okay. Okay, I explained to you that all of the natural world, both individual and collective facts, indicate that there is an eternal, unseen metaphysical primary.
Yeah,
okay?
that's just an assertion.
Which facts? Okay, I would appreciate you stop over talking me.
Which facts?
I would appreciate you stop.
I would appreciate you stop guilt
I would
galloping and
appreciate you stop over talking me.
No.
I would appreciate you stop over talking me. I've been doing my best not to over talk.
No, you haven't.
It's challenging where it's if Snake has a question on like what one of the terms you're using is like I think it's probably good to jump in like someone.
Well, I'm not being long-winded, and I would appreciate you not cutting me off.
You're being very long-winded. What evidence are you talking about?
No, I'm not. Okay.
Yes, you are.
Every time I try to get a couple of sentences out, here we go again.
What evidence?
Okay. I'm trying to speak to you, and you keep cutting me off.
What evidence?
I have presented to you.
1 second. Let's let Darth go for a second, and then we'll come back. I promise, Taylor, and we'll hear your question, but we'll let him try to finish maybe like a few sentences for you to ask questions about. Go ahead, Darth.
Now, what I have presented is the individual and collective facts in the world all necessarily indicate the eternal, that the eternal would have to be personal. Otherwise, I couldn't be personal. Otherwise, you would be making an implicit counter argument that the impersonal ultimacy begets the personal, which we can momentarily discuss. You have rejected that. You have rejected that the Bible also is a self-attesting witness of God in special revelation, revealing God's necessary property set, grounding intelligibility not only for all facts, but human knowledge and reason. So what I'm asking you now, since you reject the Christian worldview and the Christian God as the necessary precondition, what is the necessary precondition or metaphysical primary that will provide for any possibility?
I asked you what evidence. You said the individual and collective facts indicate that it has to be personal. What facts? You're just asserting that those facts. You're just saying all the facts indicate it. What facts?
I've already explained that position. You have rejected it. I have now asked you, since you reject that I'd like to finish, please.
You have asserted it.
I'd like to finish, please. Now, you have rejected my evidentiary presentation as evidence. You have denied that it is evidence, indicating that God is the ultimacy, the metaphysical primary of existence. So you've gone on record, you've rejected the presentation, which I understand and I accept your position. Not that I believe it. My question for you is, when you invoked concepts of reason, knowledge, and evidence, which would be causal relations between events, that's going to require some metaphysical framework or foundational primary. What I would like to know from you is, since you do not accept that the God of the Bible is the metaphysical primary, I want to know what is it that is metaphysically primary that will demarcate and prescribe what is possible and impossible. What is it?
I want to get to that, but you keep interrupting me. The reason I reject it is because you have merely asserted that all facts indicate your God, and I'm trying to ask you what evidence indicates your God. You're just saying all of it.
Did you need me to repeat the question?
I have been asking you the same question, and you tried to. Can I finish? Can I finish?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What you're ignoring, what you're trying to pawn off and try to change the subject on, is I'm pushing you on the reason I reject what you're saying is because you haven't given any specifics. You've merely asserted that all facts indicate your God. So you can't answer that. So you're trying to push it onto me and ask me a question because you can't answer it.
Okay, actually, I did give you an answer. The fact that you did not believe it does not mean that I did not give you an answer. So in turn, I ask you, since you reject the presentation, the evidentiary support, and the rational justification for the God of the Bible being metaphysically primary, since you reject that, you have then went on, you have made a number of statements of possibility and impossibility. What I would like to know, since the God of the Bible is not metaphysically primary for those things, I would like to know from you, you said earlier that we shouldn't be making baseless assumptions. You have made numerous statements of possibility and impossibility. So what I would like to know is, what is it that is metaphysically primary that provides and prescribes for all possibility and impossibility?
I really want to get to that. That's what I want. What I wanted to have this conversation on, and I would like to finish what I'm saying. But you didn't give an answer, which is why you can't give me the answer again. You've merely asserted that all things. Maybe I missed it. How about you tell me just one piece of evidence?
Okay. All facts, both individually and collectively,
just as I said,
temporal facts indicate an eternal. Okay, I'd like to finish.
Which ones is what I'm asking. You didn't hear me.
All facts.
You didn't hear me.
Yeah, you keep on cutting me off. I would appreciate you stop cutting me off.
We'll come back. Well, it's totally fine to want to know what those terms are. What we'll do is maybe just give Darth a few sentences, and then we'll come right back to what those facts are in particular.
Yeah. Being obnoxious in a conversation does not make for good debate. Now, I have presented to you the evidentiary case for the Christian worldview. You have personally concluded that it does not constitute evidentiary support and rational justification. Is that correct?
What's correct is when I ask what facts indicate it, you literally respond, all facts indicate it. So you can't answer the question. So let's move on.
Have you rejected my evidentiary presentation and rational justification for God?
There's nothing to reject. You've just merely said all facts indicate it. When I ask you what those facts are, you just say all facts. So you don't have a answer for me.
Okay, actually,
so we'll move on to my answer.
Do you reject the rational justification that I presented? Do you not accept it?
There's no argument there. You just said all facts indicate it.
So you don't accept what I said. Is that correct?
No. I do not accept it.
Okay, good. Thank you. Now we're going to make progress here. Now, you made a number of assertions about what is, can be, and cannot be. Okay? What I'd like to know from you, since you categorically do not accept that the God of the Bible is metaphysically and ontologically primary, I would like to know, when you make assertions of possibility and impossibility in your worldview, what is it that is metaphysically primary or ontologically primary that prescribes any and all possibility?
You say it's God, even though you can't give me even a single reason why it's God. You can't actually explain how God is necessary for any of these things. My answer is the law of non-contradiction. Something cannot exist and not exist at the same time, in the same place, in the same way. And from that, or along with that, we can include the law of excluded middle, that something is either true or it's not true, and the law of identity, that which is. And so what I base everything on is nothingness cannot be at any time. There at no point was there nothingness. Why are you interrupting me?
Because I'd like to know how you know that.
Know what?
How do you know that nothingness cannot be?
Well, you interrupted me. I was getting to it.
Okay.
Perhaps you could allow me to finish. Nothingness cannot be and at the same time produce something. Otherwise, then it's something. Something exists, therefore nothingness never existed, if that makes any sense. Nothingness is totally logically incoherent.
What is it that is metaphysically primary that prescribes all those possibilities and impossibilities that you have stated?
The law of non-contradiction?
Is
what it is.
Is the law of non-contradiction something that is concrete or abstract?
It's obviously concrete.
Okay. And can you give me what is the first property of that is concrete, that is metaphysically primary? What is its concrete property?
That which is.
No, I'm asking you what is metaphysically primary. Okay. Hold on a second. All you're simply telling me, the laws of logic, which we can discuss momentarily, simply describe how anything that is extant is. It doesn't tell me why it is. I want to know what it is that is primary and why it exists ontologically, not that it cannot exist in a state where it cannot equal its negation. What is it that is metaphysically primary? Okay, the ground of all being, that prescribes why anything at all exists. The laws of non-contradiction does not explain why why things ontologically exist.
Yeah,
so
it does.
The question is, no, it doesn't. All it simply describes that what is cannot equal its negation.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't
And so
tell
we
you why
have
it is.
something. So
Does
we
the law of non-contradiction explain why things exist ontologically?
Yeah,
How?
because there is something. Therefore, nothingness.
Why
is
does
not
something
possible.
exist?
Nothingness is not possible. Therefore, the only other possibility is
Okay.
something.
No, when you say nothingness is not possible, you're talking about a possibility. I want to know ontologically what is primary, that why anything at all exists. Telling me the law of the law of non-contradiction does not tell me why something ontologically exists. It simply states that whatever does exist, it cannot equal its negation. It doesn't tell me why it ontologically exists. So I'd like to know, what is it that is ontologically primary that prescribes why anything is possible? Does the law of non-contradiction, is it possible for me to, does the law of non-contradiction, does it prescribe whether I can jump to the moon right now?
Yeah.
No, does it prescribe why I can do that?
You can't.
No. Does the law of non-contradiction, saying A cannot equal not A, does it prescribe why I can or cannot jump to the moon?
Sure.
How?
Because it describes the behaviors of all things.
No, how does it describe why I can or cannot jump to the moon? All it's saying is A cannot equal not A.
Mm-hmm.
So how does the law of non-contradiction prescribe what I can and cannot do, other than it cannot equal its negation?
Because what you are is limited by what it is, and what you are is something that cannot jump to the moon. It's like binary.
Why
Can't
I jump to the moon?
ones and zeros, which is either on or off, and that the combination of just that binary code can create all of the different things that we're doing right now.
That is a non-answer to what I just said. I'm shocked that you even said that.
Just to be sure that
The law-
we get to hear I don't know if he was done yet. Taylor,
Okay.
was that the rest? Was that all you had to say, or were you still going?
No, but he can go.
The law of non-contradiction just is simply the position that whatever is, it can't equal its negation. It doesn't tell me what prohibits what's possible and impossible with respect to it cannot equal its negation. Now, what I'd like to know is, what is it that is metaphysically primary that prescribes any and all possibility other than an entity cannot equal its negation? Are there other possibilities and impossibilities other than an entity equaling its negation or not equaling its negation? Are there any other possibilities?
I'm not sure what you're not understanding about this. Just saying ontologically doesn't make it more or less coherent. We know, for example, that God cannot do this because God is subject to those very same laws, and he cannot break them. Therefore, he's subject to them.
Are there laws that are metaphysically primary?
Yeah, we've been over them.
Okay. Well, stating the laws of logic would be universals. Do you know? Okay. How do you know any universals exist?
Well, anything else is incoherent.
I'm still waiting. How do you know that there are universals?
Because the opposite is incoherent.
Yeah, that's just definitional. How do you know that anything is universal?
How do you know?
I'm waiting for an answer.
I already answered you.
I'd like an answer to my question.
I already answered you. How do you know?
How do I know? Through the revelation of God, but you reject that.
That's not a way to know anything. Some guy told me, or I had a vision is not a way of knowing anything.
Okay. What is ontologically the foundation of why there can be reason?
Because it works. The laws of logic work.
Well, the laws of logic are abstractions. Do you mean the way the world works in terms of the causal principle?
I'm not sure what you mean by that, but we know that God is.
No, you said things
God
that work.
is subject to all of those things that we're talking about. So we know that God is contingent upon.
So what is it that is ultimate then?
I would describe it as logic. Obviously, logic as we know it is just a language to describe how it works.
Is logic abstract or concrete?
Are you interrupting me right now?
No, I'd like to know if it's concrete or abstract.
Did you just interrupt me? Yes or no?
That's a qualifying question. You seem to be
so
evading
since you
many of my
interrupted me,
questions.
since you interrupted while I was speaking, I didn't hear what you asked.
Yeah, is logic that which is ultimate?
Sure, I would say so.
Okay. Is it concrete or abstract?
Both.
Okay. Well, actually, it has to be one or the other.
Nope.
Can you tell me what the concrete properties are of what is ultimate?
What do you mean by concrete, though? It's
okay? If it's immaterial, then it's okay. Listen.
I said is immaterial. I-N.
Okay, I want to know.
It is also able to be abstracted by minds.
I want to know what it is. What it is the reason why anything at all exists. Why does the moon exist?
The moon? Because a rock hit the earth.
Okay. No, I'm talking about foundationally and in a metaphysically primary way.
Why does anything exist?
Why does do you believe in matter and energy, causality, and laws of nature? Why do those things exist? Are they eternal or are they temporal?
Whatever is creating them is eternal.
I would like to know what is it that is metaphysically primary that instantiated matter, energy, causality, and laws of nature?
The brute fact that nothingness is logically incoherent. So it cannot exist, so the alternative must exist.
Do you know what a brute fact is?
Mm-hmm.
What?
It's just something that is true.
Is it something? It's something that's true that does not actually have an explanation. It just is.
Sure.
Okay, so do you accept that what is ultimate is simply an array of brute facts?
Maybe.
Well, you need to tell me what it is. If you're going to deny that the God of the Bible and his property set are not grounds for reason and human intelligibility, I want to know what is metaphysically primary and ultimate. Okay, so what is it that is ultimate? Is it an array of brute facts?
It is the facts that nothingness is logically incoherent.
I don't even know what that means.
I've explained it to you many times.
Is what is ultimate one or the many?
It could be one, it could be many. I know it's not a mind.
No, what I'd like to know is it one thing or is it many?
I don't know.
So you don't know what's ultimate then?
I know it's not a god.
Do you know what is ultimate?
We know parts of it, sure.
What is it that is ultimate? Is it one concrete thing, or is it one thing abstractly, which is a concrete many?
Personally, I understand it more as one thing.
Is it a concrete thing? One?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. What is the fundamental ontological property of the one?
That it exists, that something must exist.
Existence is not a predicate. That's a big mistake in philosophy. I want to know what it is that is on. Why? Because existence is not a predicate. It's not a property. Now, what I'd like to know from you is, since you believe that you can reason, you can be coherent without the God of the Bible. All right. I want to know what it is that is ontologically primary that prescribes any and all possibility. You told me it was a concrete one, but it is not a concrete many. Is that correct?
From the way I understand it.
Okay,
it could
good.
be
Then
there's three laws of thought. It could be
no,
three.
I don't
want to
know what
as
could
I
be.
understand
I don't want to know
that
what
the
could be.
other two come from the one, which is the law of non-contradiction.
No, I don't. You see, you're very confused here. I don't want to know what you say it could be. I want to know what it is in your worldview that grounds the statements of possibility. Remember earlier you said we cannot make baseless assumptions. So I want to know foundationally and ontologically, what is it that is the fundamental reason why anything at all exists? The laws of logic do not explain why things exist. They simply explain that the things that do exist, they equal themselves in a time index and they cannot equal their negation. But it does not explain why entities ontologically exist. I want to know what is it that is metaphysically primary, since you reject that it is God. I want to know what it is that is ontologically primary. You said it's concrete, and I want to know what it is. Because if you don't tell me what that is, you're not going to have grounds for reason or intelligibility.
The laws of logic explain why nothingness is incoherent, and that explains why things do exist.
No, we've already covered
now,
this.
I want to ask some questions. Is that fair?
You can ask questions of me, but you have not answered my questions.
I have absolutely answered it.
No, you have not. I want to know what is concretely, metaphysically primary. The laws of logic do not explain why anything at all actually exists. It's simply a description that for whatever does exist, it cannot equal its negation, and it equals itself in a time index. But it doesn't explain ontologically why something exists. So I want to know, what is it that is ultimate, since it's not God, since it will be the foundation of your ability to reason and to predicate. I want to know concretely, what is it that is metaphysically primary?
You keep repeating the question, even though I've answered it. So follow along.
No, you haven't answered it.
So follow along very carefully. The laws of logic explain why nothingness is incoherent. One.
No, they do not.
And the fact that nothingness is incoherent explains why things exist. The laws of logic do explain why nothingness is incoherent.
Explain to me, how does the law of identity explain why anything at all does exist?
Because nothingness is incoherent.
How is that incoherent?
Because something exists and something cannot come from nothing.
That does. Yeah. You're listen. You are extremely confused. All right, and I'm not trying to be insulting.
Tell me where I'm wrong. How can something come from nothing?
Because what you're doing is I'm not asserting that. What I'm saying to you is, you keep on pulling from your script by appealing to the laws of logic. The laws of logic do not state what is ontologically primary. It's simply a characterization about how anything at all exists, be it eternal or temporal, whatever distinct entity, that it equals itself in a time index and it cannot equal its negation. It is not a statement of why something ontologically exists. Now, what is it that is ontologically primary, that prescribes how anything is possible and why anything at all ontologically exists? What is that ontological primary? And please don't say the laws of logic, because we've gone over this.
The laws of logic.
Okay,
so we agree that something cannot come from nothing.
That doesn't answer the question.
Can we agree that something cannot come from nothing?
I can agree with you, because your worldview doesn't have a foundation.
Neither does yours, and you can't explain why.
Okay.
And you're unwilling to answer any questions or let me finish my questions.
Oh, I'll be glad to answer your questions, but are you admitting that your worldview doesn't have a foundation?
Of course it has a foundation. Yours doesn't.
What is your ontological, metaphysical primary foundation?
So can we agree that something cannot come from nothing?
I asked you a question. What is it that is metaphysically primary?
I asked you a question and you dodged it.
I'm not dodging questions.
Can we agree that something cannot come from nothing?
I will await your answer to the question. Giving me the answer, the laws of logic are
not. You're going to be waiting for a long time then, because you're avoiding my question.
I'm not avoiding. I'll be glad to answer a long list of your questions. I want to know what is it that is metaphysically primary, and the reason why anything exists, not the state that they exist in where they cannot equal their negation. I'm asking you, why does anything metaphysically or ontologically exist? Okay, and that will be what is ultimate. So what is it concretely that is ultimate?
The laws of logic explain
We've
why
already
nothingness is
we've already been
incoherent.
over this again. The laws of logic, the law of identity
Oh,
doesn't
so why
explain.
can't
Does the
why can't
law
I
of
speak?
identity? Does the law of
why can't I
identity
speak?
explain?
Why can't
You
I
will
speak?
Hold on a
speak. You will
second.
speak.
Okay.
Does the law of
1
identity
second.
You're getting a
explain?
little.
1 second.
You're getting
Does
a
the
little
law
heated.
of
1 second.
identity? Yeah,
1
because you're
second.
being rude and
You're
obnoxious.
getting.
1 second.
You're getting a little
Okay.
heated there, Cupcake.
So
Yeah,
just where we
especially
are.
when you're a rude, obnoxious
Just where
punk.
we are. Just
You're
to
the
be
one
sure
interrupting.
just to be
Yeah,
sure we know
yeah.
where we are.
Why don't you give me
All
an
right.
adult answer?
Come on now. So I can't remember who asked the original question last.
Yeah.
So
I asked,
I do
what
think
is it that is
that's not-
ontologically
that's not-
primary?
No,
He
no,
keeps on
I was,
saying the laws
I
of
was
logic.
saying I don't remember who it was that asked it first. So what we can do is, I do know, Darth, you have asked a lot of questions, which is great. There's nothing wrong
I haven't
with
had
that.
my question answered.
But what we'll do is we'll give Snake a chance to ask a question.
So well, here's a clarification. If the laws of logic are what is metaphysically primary and eternal, does that mean all entities are eternal, Snake?
Nope.
Well, then that means that the laws of logic cannot be metaphysically primary, because some of the things that are represented as the laws of logic are temporal. So you can't answer anymore the laws of logic. What is it that is metaphysically primary, that is the ground of why things exist? Okay.
So I'm rude, but when the moderator is literally telling you to allow me to ask a question, you just jump in and start asking your
I'll be
questions.
glad to
again.
answer your questions. I want an
No,
answer
you
to my
won't.
question.
No, you won't. You're just
I'm
going to
waiting
keep
for an answer.
repeating your question like the aggressive.
That's
person
because you
are.
haven't answered it.
Yes, I have. You don't like the answer.
The
That's
laws
thing.
of logic, do the laws of logic cover all entities?
So wait a minute. I don't think so. I had said that we'd go to Snake for his question. So I think that I don't know if that was actually asked. So Snake, did you get to ask that question?
I'll be glad
Nope.
to answer a series of questions. I want
Wait.
my question answered.
Wait,
the
you-
laws
you've
of
asked a
logic
lot of
cannot be
questions, so
ontologically
we're gonna
primary.
we're gonna give Snake a chance to ask a
Yeah,
question.
yeah. Give him a get out of jail card free, okay?
Listen.
Or get out of jail free card.
Listen to this. Okay, go ahead, Snake.
I mean, I have so many questions, but I would start with,
Yeah, you're not
Can
going to get any
we-
answers
oh,
to my
wow.
questions until you
Wow.
answer mine.
wow.
I'm not going to answer any. Answer my question.
Wait, Duncan, it's fair. Like, you've asked a lot of questions.
No, it's not fair. He hasn't answered the question. The laws of logic, by definition, cannot be ontological primary.
Duncan, we're just gonna give him a chance to ask a question.
Because if they're
you cut him
universal,
off,
then
though.
everything is ontologically primary.
Duncan, I appreciate.
Is everything
your
ontologically primary, Snake?
Duncan, no, that's not
See,
how this works.
He should call himself Snake is the Dodger.
Okay, so we're gonna give him a chance to ask his question, but without being interrupted. So we'll
Yeah,
give him
I
a
thought
shot.
you were going to get me a serious interlocutor, James.
Oh, here we go. Okay, go
Yeah,
ahead,
here we
Snake.
go.
Okay, so we just have to just only answer your questions, and if you don't like that, then you just keep
No, what I
asking
don't
the
like
same.
is you
wow.
keep on dodging and evading my question.
Oh man.
That's what I don't like. And I'm going to confront you to your face in front of the YouTube audience.
And so we established in the first couple of minutes that you couldn't answer any of the questions. You kept dodging. What evidence? You couldn't even give a single piece of evidence, and now you're. So
Is that
I
a
think you're
question
little-
or is
I
that a
think you're a little bit-
recapitulation?
I think you're a little bit triggered by the fact that I exposed that right in the
No,
first.
you
few
haven't
minutes.
exposed anything. You're
So
just making
now you're
assertions.
trying to push it back on me, and you're not allowing me to ask
Okay.
any follow-up questions, or you just want it to be a one-sided thing. So
All right, how about every question you ask me, I'll say the laws of logic, the laws of logic, the laws of logic. How would you like that?
I didn't merely answer with the laws of logic. I explained
Yeah, you
what
did.
the laws of logic explain, why
Well, where did
nothingness
you-
is
where did-
incoherent, and
well,
why things don't exist. I don't
could
merely
you-
state the
Hey,
laws
could
of
you
logic
tell me
like
where do you
like
get these
you
universals
state-
from?
like you merely state God explains it, but you won't explain how God explains any of it.
Actually, I did explain it. You just don't
didn't.
accept it.
You merely asserted it.
Okay. And you merely asserted that there are universals. How
So
did you determine?
Can we?
How did you determine there are universals? Explain that to
Let's-
the YouTube audience.
Let's walk through this together. if
How
that's
did you
even
determine there are
possible.
universals?
Can we agree that something cannot come from nothing?
In my worldview, God is the grounds of all possibility and demarcates impossibility. There is no realm where there is an impersonal absolute, unless you want to argue for it. Do you want to argue for an impersonal absolute as a grounding?
That's not what I asked, is it? Can we agree that something cannot come from nothing?
I cannot agree because we have two different worldviews. So
I don't have a worldview.
Actually,
I just have observations. No, I don't.
No, okay, wow. Okay. Are observations grounded ontologically?
Sure. Can we agree that something cannot come from nothing?
Okay.
Not a God. A God cannot ground it because you haven't explained how a God grounds any of it. You just said,
if a God
in my belief, it grounds it.
Wow.
Well, that's not good enough.
Yeah, James, you're gonna have to screen my interlocutors better the next time. This is terrible. This is as bad as the last couple of guys. Okay.
Okay, Cupcake. So can we agree that something cannot come from nothing?
Okay. Nothing cannot exist because God is a necessary being. Anything that does exist. Okay. Well, in your worldview, how are there inferences in your not God worldview if it does not follow?
Because being is necessary.
How do you know anything is necessary? How do you know anything is necessary?
Because it has to be. Because otherwise, it's incoherent. Otherwise, it just becomes a soup of incoherent
then all
nonsense.
You're simply saying is, okay, well then how do you know the world is
If nothing is necessary, then things can't behave in ways. They would just be completely random.
Could you tell me what is it that is ontologically and metaphysically necessary? What is it?
Existence.
That existence is not a predicate. I've already explained that to you.
That doesn't explain anything.
Okay.
Something must exist.
Listen to me. How do you know that?
Because something exists.
Okay, so what you're saying is therefore there can't be contradictions?
Humans can make contradictions, but
no, I said can there be
contradictions in the laws of physics?
Why can't there be any contradictions?
In the laws of physics?
You keep on saying can't. What is it that is ultimately that prevents anything from not being? What is it that is ontologically primary that prescribes what can and cannot be?
Whatever it is, that's what's controlling God's behavior.
Could you tell me what it is that is what is it that is ontologically primary that makes whatever is what establishes what's necessary? You said something is necessary. Well, the only necessary thing will be what is ontologically primary. What is that?
I've already explained this. Whatever makes logic work. So
no, logic doesn't work. Logic is an abstraction. Logic is abstractions. Now,
things behave according to rules.
So there are
including your God.
Okay, so you believe that there are causal relations?
Yes.
Okay. What is it that institutes causal relations between events?
Cause and effect. The fact that's how things work.
No, you're just repeating repeating the same claim. What is it? Listen carefully.
You're not allowing me to finish.
Okay. No, you're not understanding. You repeated the same answer. Now, what is it?
I'm
listen carefully. I'll be brief.
Mouth.
I will be brief. Listen to the question because you're not understanding. I will be brief. I will be brief. Okay, you didn't understand the question.
Hold on
now,
a second.
What I want to know.
What was the question?
Yeah, James, listen, you keep on inviting me here and you get these little obnoxious little punks.
All right.
I mean, this is getting irritating.
You're
okay.
You're name calling. It's like it's not
okay. Yeah, I am name calling because it's a very good observation. I'd like to get my question out. He's obviously not understanding the question. Now,
you wouldn't
you
let
said
me
it's the way things work. You didn't understand the question because you repeated the same statement. Now, let me get my question.
You wouldn't
out.
let me answer it.
What is it that instantiates and sustains causal relations and connections metaphysically and ontologically?
May I have a question?
I'd like an answer to that question. After you answer that and give me a clear, honest answer.
I've done nothing but answer your obnoxious questions this whole time.
No, you told me something was necessary. Okay. Then you said it works. I
When
want to
can
know.
when-
Okay, listen.
when can I get my
James,
questions?
listen to me, dude. Listen to me. If you, I'm not going to give up with your obnoxious little tactics. I asked you a question. If you want to ask me a series of questions, I'll answer it.
We do have
I
minimum,
want to
we do
know
have minimum
what
time.
is it? What is it that instantiates the
Okay,
causal
I'm so
principle?
sorry. Duncan, please work with me here. I don't want to. I hate muting people.
Yeah, well then speak
Okay,
to
so
Snake here.
we're-
Ask him to work with you too.
There's limited
Okay,
time.
you always go soft. You can laugh all you want, James. You always go soft on these obnoxious atheists.
No.
Every
I'm not
single
going
time.
soft. Okay, Duncan.
Yeah,
come
you
on,
are.
I'm gonna mute you. Don't do this. Come on.
I don't care. I really don't care.
Okay,
At this
just
point,
give
I'm
me
very
a second.
frustrated
Okay,
that
just give
you
me a
are
second.
have a
Duncan,
double standard.
I don't have a double standard.
Yeah, you do.
It's fair for him to want to ask questions, isn't it?
Wow, you know, James, I'm really getting irritated with you. I want to know what instantiates the causal
I'm
principle,
so sorry
Snake.
to do this. Okay, Duncan, I hope you don't quit. Don't quit. I muted you, Duncan. It's just that. Give me 1 second. Isn't it fair that that Snake would get to ask some questions as well? Like,
Yeah, I've been answering his questions. Then he
Okay.
makes these assertions,
But I think-
and I ask him, I want to know where he gets these
Hold on a
assertions. He
second.
said something's
I think-
necessary.
I think
want to know what
I know you
the simple-
want to know. I'm sorry for muting you again, but it's only
Yeah,
that-
James, you're giggling like a little schoolgirl.
I can't help it. It's the way I giggle. Okay, Duncan. It's just that there have been. I think you've maybe asked a number more, a number of significantly
I've only
more
asked
questions.
a couple of questions that he won't answer.
But I want him to have the chance to ask questions too. I think that's fair, and he's been. You have to give him credit. He's been persistent in like pushing for that.
Yeah, he's been persistently obnoxious.
No, that's not what I was thinking. So
Yeah,
why don't we do just a couple of
Yeah.
questions, like a question series?
good. Then we'll go back to this question that he refuses and dodges answer. Go ahead. I'll give you 3 questions, and then you're going to answer my question about your assertion about what's necessary. Go ahead.
I'm gonna have a lot more than 3. So I don't know everything. Your tactic seems to be just relentless onslaughts of questions. So some of your questions I would like to actually explore with you, but your tactic seems to just preach.
Do you have a question
preach,
for me?
preach.
Do you have a question for me,
Duncan,
or do you want to
Getting
lecture
there.
me?
It's fair.
Getting
for him
there.
to set it up.
I'd like a
Getting there.
question instead of giving me a little monologue.
Getting there. So I would prefer people who I can actually converse these things with.
Do
So-
you have a question for me?
Duncan, he's just let him. do the setup.
James, listen to me. You're being a terrible moderator, and I'm really getting
I
irritated
get
with
that
you.
from everybody. So thanks.
Yeah,
But
that's right.
it's Sergeant.
Snake, do you have a question for me?
We've got to give him a chance to give the the setup.
No, it's not a setup. He's monologuing. I want the question.
So your last question. What was your last question, real quick?
My question was, you stated, well, this is how the things that are necessary, how things work. And I asked you, what instantiated and sustains the causal principle so that the concept of things working and being necessary is an intelligible one? What is it that instantiates the causal principle so that inferences are an
Mhm.
intelligible concept? Because if you don't tell me what instantiates the causal principle, you have no grounds for inferences.
So I would like to explore those concepts with you and ask some questions about your
Do you have an answer to
worldview,
my question?
because we can expose how weak the answer of God is and how God's behavior is, in fact, dependent upon these causal principles. So you asked, how do we know what instantiates causal principles so things can work intelligibly? And I want to know, how does your God do that?
Okay. God is a necessary eternal being. He is the ground of all being. He's eternal without being. He is the unifying first principle that instantiates all possibility and impossibility. He is
How?
a necessary entity.
How does God just instantiate things just because he
How did
exists?
it? By the power of his will.
That doesn't answer anything. That doesn't make sense.
It does answer it. No, actually, it does, because God has. Do you want an answer or not? Did you want to speak for me?
I started speaking.
Or are you just going to continue to be obnoxious like you have the whole time?
I started speaking and then allowed you to speak, because sometimes people start speaking at the same time.
God simply wills. God simply wills, and things happen. Do you will things and things happen?
Nope.
So when things happen, when you eat, it's not because you will it.
I can't just will some food in front of me and then it happens.
I didn't say that. I said
that's what I was answering, though.
Okay. Well, you can't do that, but that's not a logical defeater that God can't do it. Now, what I want to know from you is, you are drawing inferences. Your whole line of reasoning in response to me is a line of inferences. Now, you told me that inferences were viable and intelligible, okay, in virtue of the causal principle. What is it that instantiates the causal principle and sustains it?
So I didn't hear any logical response at all.
I will repeat the question. I will repeat the question until you answer it.
God, that's what I'm doing, because you haven't answered my question. You said God is eternal without being, and therefore things make sense. But I don't see any logical conclusion there. Where's the syllogism? Where's the logic? How does that follow?
I didn't give you a syllogism. I simply described for you. I just described to you, okay, what the nature of God was. Now, what I'd like to know from you is, in all of your responses to me, in all of your rejections, you are using inferences. You're using inference rules. You say that's the way things work. Now, in your worldview, is there something that ontologically or metaphysically instantiates the causal principle so that you can reason?
So that I can reason, or so things work? Do you reason? Because you're changing your question there.
Do you reason in virtue of the causal principle?
Sure.
Good. What is it that instantiates and sustains the causal principle?
The fact that things have to make sense.
No, that's an abstraction. What is it that concretely instantiates the causal principle so that you can reason about anything? Yeah, yet it was an abstraction. What is it?
Not.
Yeah,
it's
dude,
not abstract.
You're a train wreck. You don't understand.
Hold on. It's not
You're just being argumentative at this point.
It's not abstract that chemicals behave in certain ways. That is concrete.
Okay, how do you are there laws of nature?
Yeah.
What instantiates the causal principle so that there can be laws of nature?
What instantiates the causal principle so that there can be laws of nature? The fact that something can only be what it is, or else it's not what it is.
That does not explain to me how it instantiates the causal principle.
Yeah, if something is what it is, then it does what it does.
Okay. No, you're not understanding.
So God, do you know what
instantiate means? Okay, is the causal principle eternal?
Probably not.
Well, then something needs to instantiate it. What instantiated the causal principle, and what sustains it?
How does God do that? You haven't answered that at all.
I'd like an answer to the question. You're claiming that you can reason without God.
We've gone round and round on that.
You claimed that you can reason without God, that God is illogical. Listen, I'd like to finish instead of you over-talking me for the umpteenth time. Now, you claim to be able to reason without God, that your reason is derived from the causal principle. You have said that the causal principle is not eternal.
No, I haven't.
What is it that instantiates and sustains the causal principle so that you can reason about anything, including God?
You would need to explain that too.
I'd like an answer to my question. So
the way that I figure that out is I actually assume that there's a God.
Okay. What is it that instantiates? You said earlier, I took notes
over me
in your opening statement. In your opening statement, you said
that we
cannot make baseless assumptions. Are you making a baseless assumption about the causal principle?
Nope.
Okay, what is it that instantiates the causal principle if the causal principle is not eternal?
We're going to
So
give
to explore-
Snake a chance to respond, and then we'll give
Yeah.
Snake a chance to ask a question in return, and then we'll go into
Well,
Q&A.
I haven't had my questions being answered. All I'm getting is filibustering.
I'm not done.
Yeah, I haven't had any answers to my questions, but dodging and evading. Here's the question.
Hold on,
What is it that
Duncan,
instantiates the causal principle?
Duncan.
You can laugh all you want, but maybe if you moderated and asked them to answer the question, we wouldn't have this problem.
Like, all I said, how is this unfair?
I'm waiting for an answer to my question.
I
What
was
is it that
just- hold on a
instantiates
second.
the causal principle?
But we're on the same page, right? So, like, Duncan, we're gonna let you ask a question, then Taylor will ask a question, and then we'll does that make sense, right? Because I think Taylor was trying to respond to the last question you asked, though. And
No,
you-
he's not.
you
What do you
interrupted.
you having problems with your headset? He's been entirely evasive, James. You can
You
giggle
don't
all
like
you
my
want.
answer.
No, I didn't get an answer. What
My
is it
answer
that,
breaks
what is
your
it that,
script, so you
what
don't
is
like
it that
it.
all you're giving me is evasive rhetoric. I want to know metaphysically, what is it that instantiates and sustains the causal principle? You said the causal principle is not eternal. What is it that instantiates the causal principle?
As far as we can tell, that just seems to be a brute fact. And so I
So
would like
nothing?
to explore that.
Nothing?
I would like to explore that from the
Okay.
perspective of assuming that a God exists.
Okay,
How does
so-
a God, how is a
Hold on,
God
hold on.
necessary?
I need clarification here. So the causal principle, in your view, okay, that it forms the foundation of why anything is. Is it
Causality?
a brute fact? May I finish, please?
I
Now-
need clarification.
The causal
Causality?
principle, the causal principle itself, okay, is it what is metaphysically primary, or does something instantiate it and sustain it?
So are you talking about causality?
The causal principle, that there are causal relations between any two events whatsoever. You stated that the causal principle is not eternal. You reject the notion that it is God who instantiates the causal principle. I want to know, what is it that is metaphysically primary that instantiates and sustains causal sequencing?
The fact that something cannot be what it isn't. How many
That
times
just-
do I have to?
all
What
that-
aren't
all
you
that-
understanding
all that
about
is
this?
a statement.
Okay,
It just
we
is.
give him a chance
When
to
you
respond.
when you
We
say
gave him-
when
we
you
gave
when you
Snake a
assert
chance
the
to-
law of identity,
Snake a
all you're
chance to
simply
answer.
saying is
Hold
the
on one
causal
second.
principle.
Okay, so sorry to do this, Darth, but we gave Snake a chance to.
Yeah, and again, for the umpteenth time, he's evaded.
How are you, Darth? How are you finding out how to unmute yourself? Okay, so basically, we're gonna give Snake a chance to ask a question now. So, Snake, if you want to ask a question, the floor is all yours.
So to answer your question, we can observe that it happens. We can calculate that it happens, and the fact that the way things work, what things are, they can interact with each other, and their interactions cause different states of being. And
That's
so
not an answer to my question.
I would like to know. Yes, it is. It absolutely
No, it is not.
In all
Well, you're just
possible ways.
stating what is. You're
It
not telling me
doesn't-
what instantiates
Let's
it.
give.
It's
let's give
not
him a
what
chance
you-
to ask his question. So, Snake. if you
Wow,
wanna
I
ask
mean,
your
are
question,
you
go
this obtuse?
It's
That doesn't
not,
tell me what instantiates it.
It breaks your script, so you're freaking
No,
out
it's
a
not
little
a
bit.
script. No, it's not a script.
It is.
I'm
I've heard this
irritated.
script 1,000 times in all of your
I'm irritated
debates.
because you're obnoxious, you're rude,
Wait,
and
hold
you're
on.
evasive.
Duncan,
I want to
you're
know
so
what I want to
angry.
know what
Duncan,
instantiates
give
the
me a
causal
second.
principle.
We're
All you're
gonna
just
give-
simply telling me that it is. It's a
you have
brute
to
fact.
You have to give him a chance to ask a question. So we're gonna give Snake a chance.
At some point, you're gonna have to say it just is what it is, and you say that with God. And when I
Is that what
say
you're saying?
at some point, you kind of have to. At least from
Okay, is
we
that
don't
your
have
answer?
we don't have complete
Excellent.
knowledge. So my approach, as I've been trying to get to, is I actually assume that. Well, for that approach, I don't assume as course that there is a God, but when I'm exploring these concepts, how do we know X is this, or how do we know that there's a causality? How do we know that we're not just hallucinating at all? How do we know anything exists? Well, that one's pretty easy to answer, but I go, so how would it work if there was a God?
everything would still have the same answers if there was a God. Things have to work the way that they work, and God has to work in a certain way because God's nature is limited to a certain way. I am wondering what is limiting God's nature to work in that certain way, and that's all I'm talking about. And we can explore that together, but you can't explore that because you have to assume that God is in charge, is above all of that, and is not caused by that. So you're incapable of actually answering the question.
Yeah, that was absolutely disaster. If you actually studied a little bit theology, you wouldn't make such a mess. Are you familiar with the concept of immutability in God's nature?
Well, we'll give you a chance.
Have you ever heard of immutability? I'm answering him.
Wait,
are you familiar with the concept of God's immutability of nature?
Assume that for the sake of the audience that he doesn't know what it is. Just explain it for us, and then we'll.
No, he doesn't. Do you understand what the immutability of God's nature is?
You already asked him. You already said no. So now.
Good. Do you have an answer?
No, I said yeah.
What is it?
Immutability of God's nature, as I understand it, would be that God's nature does not change, that it is primary, and that it is fundamental, and it doesn't change. Is that?
All right, fine. What is it that is immutable and eternal and ultimate that instantiates anything ontologically? Telling me the laws of logic.
That's another question. So we are going to go into Q&A. So thanks so much.
So James, next time, you know what? I may not show up again if you invite me, unless you get me better interlocutors instead of people that just constantly dodge and evade my questions.
Snake is sitting right here. How could you say that?
No, he's been entirely obnoxious and evasive the entire time, as bad as the last two interlocutors that I've had.
The irony. So can I ask one more question, if that's okay?
Sure. I'll give you the same answer you gave me. The laws of logic, laws of logic, laws of logic, laws of logic. It just is. It just is.
That's not what I've said at all.
That's exactly what you said.
You may have cut me off before I finished my thought.
You didn't tell me that the laws of logic are metaphysically primary and are the ground of all being.
So you may have cut me off and you didn't get my full answer. You didn't say that? So my question is, going along with your immutability, can God change his nature? No. Can God change the equation 2 + 2 = 4?
God is the source of all possibility and impossibility. Okay. And
why are things the way they are? Okay. Why is God's nature that way?
I'm answering you. Do you want an answer?
You're not answering.
You know what? You are one of the most obnoxious and rude individuals I've had the displeasure of interacting with.
All right, let's see. We're gonna go.
That's a compliment coming from you, man.
I'm attempting to answer I'm attempting to answer the question. Okay.
We're gonna go to Q&A.
Whatever is possible or impossible will be instituted and demarcated for God. 2 + 2.
Let's see.
I'm answering his question, James. I'm answering his questions. Are you going to stop me from answering his questions?
As long as you don't answer it with a question.
James, listen, I'm really getting irritated with you.
I wouldn't have guessed.
Now,
okay, so
2 + 2 are abstract. Okay, the number 2, when we talk about mathematics are abstract objects. Are you aware of that, Snake?
They're not objects.
Okay,
they follow rules.
Okay, all right, Snake,
let me answer.
Let
me answer.
I asked you I'll repeat the question. No. Are you aware? Okay. Are you aware that numbers and the relationship to numbers are abstract objects?
I said that your answer could not be a question, so we do have to go to the actual Q&A.
All right, yeah, James. Unless you can secure for me an interlocutor who's going to debate with me like an adult, I won't be back again, James.
All right.
Yeah, you can giggle like the Girl Scout all you want.
Thank you, Matra J Disco, for your super chat. They said, congrats, Darth, on getting Corona big plus. Oh, come on, Matra. Darth's a nice guy.
Yeah. Hey, James, make this fast because I'm irritated not only with this rude, evasive little punk. I'm irritated with you as well.
It's good for you.
Yeah, make this fast.
It's better if you point your anger at me. Snake he's been.
Yeah. Well, didn't I ask you the last time we talked? I said, get me a serious interlocutor instead of these people who are going to be rude, obnoxious, and evasive. Do you remember that conversation, James?
I think you said.
You remember
like,
that conversation?
You were like, I want to debate Snake was right, and right now. And I was like, I'll see what I can do.
Excuse me? I did not ask you that. You were the one who contacted me, and you said, oh, Snake is right. It will be. You were the one who sent it to me.
You're just so. Is this? I can't believe.
Are you telling me that I requested to debate Snake?
You were like, I desperately want to debate Snake was right. And
where did you get that from? Okay. Where did you get that from? You didn't get that from any DM from me.
I made that up. Okay, next up.
Okay, so you're lying. Well, hold on a second. So you're lying to the YouTube audience right now, James?
No,
I think we broke him.
I'm giving you crap, Duncan. I'm teasing you.
Okay,
Duncan.
yeah, and you know what? This is what a crappy performance you're delivering as a host and as a moderator.
Geez, Duncan, I'm sitting right here. Come on.
Well, I don't appreciate when you lie to me about the YouTube audience and then you start giggling and saying it's a joke.
We'll miss you, Duncan.
Listen, we love you, Duncan. Everybody loves you here. Next up, thanks for your super chat from Nella Dower, who says, Duncan is cringy transphobe, your final form.
Yeah, make this fast before I close out this window, James.
Oh, Duncan, don't leave. Okay.
I'm really irritated with you.
No, we're friends. Okay, Steven Steen, thanks for your super chat. They said Trump 1010 COVID response. Says that Trump received a
James,
10 out of
did
10.
you when I ask you, James? No, I want to ask you a question. I want to ask you a question. So the whole YouTube audience.
I hate to mute you. Listen, it's just a question about. It's a super chat mentioning.
No. Did you inquire of Snake? Did you tell him that I want?
Listen, Duncan, you're so sassy. Just always have to have all the attention. Steven Steen said Trump.
No. Hey, James. Again, you've been a crappy moderator. Thank you for wasting.
Duncan, why are you so angry? Oh, Duncan! No! Duncan! Are you there, Duncan? I think we lost Duncan. Okay.
We broke him.
Duncan, man, I don't know what to do. Duncan, is he just hiding? I don't know. Okay, so I didn't expect that. It appears Duncan left. We got no hard feelings for him. If you're watching right now, you probably noticed the pictures scrambled and Duncan disappeared. Duncan rage quit, but I can't help it. Sometimes it's just funny. So basically, I hope he's doing well. I have no hard feelings. It was just one super chat about Trump, and he just wouldn't let it be read. So anyway, it's been a fun debate. I don't know if Duncan's ever going to come back, but I tried. You try to keep everybody happy, and that's what you get. But so Snake, thanks for hanging out with us. I can ask questions toward you, Snake, if you can do me a favor. I know that it's hard because Duncan, while he was here, was indeed throwing his poop at you. So he was saying a lot. He was talking a lot of smack. But if you can do me a favor, we can ask you questions from the audience that are for you. If you can do me a favor, just because once we got in trouble where one of the people who was not here was talked about during that Q&A, and so they were like, hey, I wasn't even there to defend myself. What the heck, James? And I was like, yeah, that's actually fair. Like, if you're not here to defend yourself, we will try to not talk about the person. So if you can resist the temptation to talk about Darth, that helps, because even though Darth was, some might say he was unfair to you or I tonight, we don't, no reason to, return it. So Steven Steen, thanks for your super chat, who says Trump had a 10 out of 10 for the coronavirus response, according to Marcus Dresden. Well, Marcus, we're glad you approve of Donald Trump. That's good. Monster J Disco, thanks for your super chat. They said, Darth, let's see. Yeah, that one's we wouldn't be able to, some of these, if they're about Duncan, we might not actually say it just because like I said.
Well, can we, if they're maybe about his arguments?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Brandon Ardeline, thanks for your super chat. It says, yep, that's another one. Let's see. Duke Davidson, I see. Um, Thanks for your super chat. They said, I know modern day debate takes no positions, but Darth is objectively, he's not fair to you. After his temper tantrum against, this is what the super chat says. After his temper tantrum against James' last debate, how can modern day debate continue to platform someone so obviously someone like that? Yeah, I mean, I usually just laugh because I don't really care what, it doesn't bother me if people are like, oh, you're James, you suck. You're moderating so bad. And so we have him back because we're kind of like, well, I'm not going to let a personal tiff between me and somebody else like stop me from having him on. But I get what you mean where it's like, tried to bring some order tonight and Duncan is no longer with us. So Stupid Whore Energy, thanks for your super chat. Says, how does Darth deal with violations of cause and effect as shown in the Stern-Gerlach experiment? That's a good question. I could try to impersonate Duncan and answer it. No, I'm just kidding. I've only got a couple impressions, like Nephilim Free and, well, welcome to Dinosaur Adventureland. All right, okay. Well, that's not my wife. That's a picture of her. Okay. But Michael Dresden, let's see. Another troll, Michael. Thanks for your super chat, though. John Rapp responds to Michael Dresden saying, you were wrong twice in one comment. Gotcha. Let's see. Stupid Whore Energy, thanks for your super chat. Says, does Duncan realize that his God is a brute fact, according to his view? I don't know. We'll have to ask him that. Maybe he'll come back. The Undead Christian, thanks for your super chat. This one's for you, Snake. They said, yes. You say you believe in evolution, but if evolution is a part of nature, what created nature? If you don't know, why rule out God as a possible answer?
Well, my main point is I don't rule out God. You need to rule in the possibility of God, first of all. It's kind of ruled out by default. What creates nature is, I think it all stems from the fact that nothingness is impossible, and so something has to exist, and that somethingness has to obey the rules of basically, well, it has to avoid contradicting its own behavior, basically, and everything else between is basically what's possible. And so I think from that you can get basic matter, and the interactions between basic matter creates nature.
Gotcha. Thanks for that. Next up, appreciate your super chat from Stupid Whore Energy, who says, why is there something rather than James? Is that supposed to mean I'm like nothing? How dare you? Stupid Whore Energy also says, James is harassing me in the DMs, telling me and I'm telling DMs, I'm telling Nickelback his favorite band. You should tell Chad Kroger. We are like on good terms, Chad and I. Wouldn't it be cool? What if because for the channel, like we could try to buy the rights to a song so that we could play it without YouTube coming after us. Should we get a Nickelback song for that? Like as the channel theme song? Let me know your thoughts, folks. John Rapp, thanks for your super chat. They said, there is no necessary metaphysical primary needed. Gotcha. I think that's... Yeah, that was for Darth. Let's see. Labser, thanks for your super chat. They said, Snake, explain how logic denies nothingness.
Basically, if nothingness was the state of the universe, then we would still be in a state of nothingness, because you can't get a something from a nothing, because a something must come from something else, and it can't just pop out of nowhere for no reason. Otherwise, that means that there is something interacting out there, and therefore nothingness is not there. So the fact that there is something means that there never was nothing. If that doesn't make grammatical sense, but I think we know what that means.
Gotcha. Thanks so much. Let's see. Appreciate it. Next up, Labser, thanks for your super chat. Let's see. They said, Darth, why Why is it that Jews and prophets don't believe in the Trinity? I don't know what they mean by prophets. Maybe they mean the Jewish prophets from the Old Testament. I'm not sure. But let's see. Cajun Crustacean, thanks for your super chat. They asked if someone can get Darth a pacifier to stop his crying. Well, let's see. We love Darth. Darth, if you're listening, Darth, you're listening. I don't know if you're listening right now, but we love you. I didn't think you were crying. I thought you were angry, but not crying. So I'm defending you. What's up? Thanks for your super chat from Saxy Calzone. It's just another throwing poop at Darth. Cygart, thanks for your super chat, who said, Snake, how do you explain the origin of the universe if something cannot come from nothing?
Well, something just is what has to have always been, because nothingness is absolute nothingness is just logically incoherent, and so the only other option is that there is something, and that's how I understand it. I don't know of any like specific science that would say that, but that
This message was delivered by Dr. Greg L. Bonson, scholar in residence at the Southern California Center for Christian Studies in Irvine, California.
All right, we've come to the point where we can now offer a definition of apologetics, which is what our course is all about. I said, boy, it's sure taken a long time to get there. I've started right away with this, but I wanted to give you some background so you can understand why I define apologetics in the way that I do. And in this, I'm actually following the definition that's been offered by Dr. Van Til and changing it only in the slightest way. Apologetics aims to defend the Christian faith against the variety of challenges leveled by unbelievers, thereby vindicating the Christian philosophy of life against all autonomous philosophies of life. I'll say that again. Apologetics aims to defend the Christian faith against the variety of challenges leveled by unbelievers, thereby vindicating the Christian philosophy of life against all autonomous philosophies of life. In this definition, hopefully you will notice that we're talking about complete worldviews, or what I've described as philosophies of life. We're looking at a whole perspective on what is true and how we know what we know and what is real, how we should live our lives. And we take the Christian way of looking at the world, the Christian way of defining truth and the standards of truth and the methods for knowing truth, and the Christian way of living, and we hold that up in contrast to other philosophies of life. We're not ultimately comparing premise for premise, one point in our system versus one point in another system. Ultimately, it's the entire system, Christianity as a unit, that we're comparing to the various autonomous philosophies of life. Now, what they all have in common is that they're autonomous, or claim to be autonomous. There are differences among them, but they are only family squabbles. You have to understand that the unbelieving world has plenty of things that unbelievers argue about philosophically and scientifically and so forth, but when all is said and done, they do have an underlying agreement with one another that the truth is not defined by God speaking authoritatively in His Word. And so we take the various versions of those autonomous philosophies of life and we vindicate our own by refuting them. Apologetics aims to defend the Christian faith against the variety of challenges leveled by unbelievers, those challenges all being tied into a larger world and life view, thereby vindicating the Christian philosophy of life against autonomous philosophies of life. So in the course of apologetics, we're working to develop a method of promoting the gospel that is coherent with the teaching of Scripture and at the same time anticipates the needs and the objections of the unbeliever. We're looking for a method of gospel promotion. Earlier I'd said we have practice, theory, and meta-apologetics. Well, we want to develop in the theoretical section of this field of study a method for approaching the defense of the faith. The method will be coherent with what the Bible teaches us, and if it's effective, it will anticipate the needs and objections of the unbeliever. Now, how are we going to anticipate the needs and objections of the unbeliever unless we know the world and we know the unbeliever better than he knows himself? I think the only way we can effectively anticipate and answer the unbeliever's objections is that we need to know him better than he knows himself and know his world better than he knows it. And that's why, although I'm a presuppositionalist, I applaud the efforts of people, for instance, in the creation science area, those who are doing research trying to unnerve the evolutionist in terms of their understanding of origins and so forth. Many of these people do not have a good philosophical or theological foundation. And I think I could certainly, and others could help them to improve their efforts by giving them a better context within which they present their evidence. But we fully believe that there's evidence there. Evolution is a silly theory, and that on its own terms it can be made to look rather ridiculous. And so we should study the world. We should not be obscurantist. And if there is a mistake that has been made in the 20th century by presuppositionalists, I believe, it is that they have often thought that presuppositional apologetics is a shortcut to winning an argument. So I don't really have to study the higher critics, and I don't really have to study the evolutionists, and I don't have to study this and that problem, because when all is said and done, I know that it's autonomy that underlies it, and I'm going to attack the autonomy of the man I'm talking to. Well, I agree that autonomy underlies it all. I agree we should attack the autonomy of the man whom we're speaking. But if we're going to anticipate and answer effectively his objections, we need to know the world better than he does. And we need to show that we know the world better than he does. So when somebody throws out the casual, objection that, well, we can account for things on the evolutionary hypothesis, I should be prepared to embarrass that point of view and say, oh, well, maybe you haven't thought about this or that problem. I mean, if evolution is true, and there's been gradual development of organic life forms by mutation, let's say, over long periods of time, then the change from one particular life form to another has to be accounted for by gradual, progressive change, all of which is favorable to the organism in terms of its environment. That's what we mean by natural selection. Nature selects the fittest to survive based on these gradual changes. But that means we have to account for the development of hearts and lungs by gradual development over time. And all of a sudden, the theory of evolution looks downright preposterous, doesn't it? As you know, half a heart isn't a help to any organism to live. Half a lung isn't a help to any organism to live. And having a heart without a lung and a lung without a heart is not a help for any organism to live. And yet we're supposed to believe that both lungs and hearts independently, gradually develop over the years independently of each other. It's just preposterous. On the face of it, it's preposterous. Now, I think I can do even better than that. Once I have the attention of the evolutionist, showing him the absurdity of his own theory, I can go on to show him that underlying that, the very notion that once there was nothing, then there was something, once there was something that was not living, and then it was living, the non-living was not intelligent, then the intelligent was non-moral, then moral. All those leaps from one characteristic or quality to its opposite just require us to sacrifice our intellect. You have to believe in fairy tales. And when I publicly talk about evolution in university settings or in hostile audiences, I often say, tongue-in-cheek, I can't be an evolutionist because it just takes too much faith. And I just can't believe that something becomes its opposite like that through some kind of natural progression. Now, I'm using this just as an illustration that we should not, if we are taking a presuppositional approach, be obscurantist about the facts of the world and the facts of history. We should know history. We should know the world better than the unbeliever. And yet for all of that, we will not win the debate. We will not really undermine the unbeliever until we go beyond the embarrassment at the factual level, if you want to put it that way, to the underlying absurdity of his worldview, where nothing would make sense if what he says about reality and knowledge and living were true. Apologetics works to develop a method of gospel promotion that is coherent with the teaching of Scripture and which anticipates the needs and the objections of the unbeliever, in which case we have to know him and we have to know the world better than he knows himself and he knows the world. Apologetic theory will lay out principles and strategies for responding to the counterattacks of unbelievers. That's what our course is all about. Now, then, to further develop the concept of apologetics, I would like to speak of its relationship to a large variety of other things. Sometimes coming to a clear grasp of what something is helped by seeing its logical relationship or its contrast to other things that surround it. And so that's what I'm going to be doing primarily in the next hour or so in this part of our course, is relating apologetics to various other things that, in the way in which people have related it, I think they've been confused and haven't had a very clear concept of what we are doing. I want to, first of all, relate apologetics to evangelism. Is apologetics the same thing as evangelism? Is it completely different from evangelism? Does evangelism precede apologetics? Does apologetics precede evangelism? Those are the kinds of questions that are kind of in the hopper now that we want to ask ourselves. We're going to be studying apologetics. Now, obviously, apologetics is interested in people coming to believe the truth. Evangelism is interested in people coming to believe the truth. So what is their relationship? And I believe that it would be correct to say that apologetics is part of evangelism. Apologetics is part of evangelism. It is, if you will, the witness that we offer to the truth in a more sophisticated and defensive mode. But it is not an alternative to evangelism, nor is it a rival to evangelism. Apologetics is part of evangelism. And in my humble opinion, the minute you separate evangelism from apologetics, what you're encouraging is pride and an intellectualistic approach to apologetics. The only reason we engage in the defense of the faith is because we want to see people saved. I mean, well, we want, obviously, God to be glorified in people being saved, but the point is, we don't engage in apologetics just so we can show we're smarter than other people, or we can win arguments, or we can belittle our opponents. Our hope, though it's not entirely in our control, because obviously the Spirit of God needs to lead people, but our hope is that God will use our testimony to change hearts and bring people to know the truth about Jesus Christ. And so I believe that apologetics should be seen as a sophisticated development of evangelism. Not all evangelism is apologetic. Stop and think about that. Sometimes I witness to somebody and they don't have any objections at all. They say, wow, I've been waiting to hear how I can be right with God. Help me, thank you. Now, wouldn't it be silly at that point to stop and say, no. You need to know that there are possible objections people would have, and I have answers for them. So before you become a Christian, let me just run you through the apologetics loop here, and then see if you still want. No, that would be ridiculous. the Spirit of God has so prepared a person's heart that they're so hungry and thirsty that when you offer the gospel, they say, exactly, that's right. Then you just go with that, don't you? But sometimes when you're testifying to people about the grace of God and the gospel, they say, well, I'm not so sure that's true, or how can I be sure that it's true? Or, well, but other people say this. At that point, your evangelistic witness becomes apologetic. At that point, you defend the faith. One of the better-known apologists of the 20th century, very popular apologist, was Francis Schaeffer. And I'm critical of some things in Schaeffer, and I'm very appreciative of other things in Schaeffer, but sadly at this point I have to be critical of Dr. Schaeffer. He had a tendency in some of his publications to present apologetics. He called it pre-evangelism. Pre-evangelism. He said, you know, the modern man has so departed from the antithetical way of thinking of the Greek philosophers, that too bothers me, but nevertheless, has so departed from that apologetics needs to talk to the modern man and do some preparatory work before he can even understand the gospel or be challenged by the gospel. At this point, some students will think, now, Dr. Bunsen, aren't you just kind of, isn't this an insignificant hair that you're wanting to slice? I mean, come on. So he believed in doing apologetics. He believes in doing evangelism. You believe that the things that are involved in what he called apologetics should be said. You believe the things he talked about evangelism should be said. So what's the big deal? It's just a matter of how you cut the cake, right? Well, many times the way in which you organize things is already an indication of some of your convictions in your operating strategy. So, no, I don't think this is an insignificant hair that we're splitting. Evangelism is not something that follows apologetics. As I've just explained, apologetics is run by the engine of evangelism, it seems to me. We're out there wanting to present the gospel to everybody. We want them to believe it. And sometimes they oppose that, and apologetics is necessary to keep pushing the evangelism forward. But it isn't as though apologetics comes first and then we evangelize. Because if you say that, then first of all, apologetics need not have an evangelistic motive. If evangelism is subsequent to, or to put it the other way around, if apologetics precedes evangelism, then apologetics may have any number of motivations and strategies that have nothing to do with wanting to see people come to know the Savior, Jesus Christ. Now, I don't think that was ever true in the life of Dr. Schaeffer. I'm not saying that about him. But that theoretical concept allows for the possibility of an academic approach that is rationalistic and autonomous, that says we have certain issues, philosophical issues, or maybe cultural issues that we have to resolve, and then finally we can come to the good news. Hey, well, I got good news that starts at the very beginning. Your academic and cultural problems are answered by the gospel, not by something that precedes the gospel, but by the gospel itself. I hope everybody can see the significance of that difference. To put it another way, when I argue about philosophical matters, when I argue about cultural matters, I want to bring the cross of Christ in to that discussion. I don't want to say, I've got certain preparatory matters that we deal with, that all men have to come to agreement on the nature of truth and philosophical method and things of that nature. And then after we've settled that, then I've got to bring the cross of Christ in. No, it seems to me it's the cross of Christ that's at the very beginning of our testimony. And that corrects our misconception, our intellectual misconceptions about truth and method and philosophy and culture as well. So, what's the relationship of apologetics to evangelism? I don't think that it's pre-evangelism. I think it's part of evangelism. The pre-evangelistic view of apologetics, it seems, is just another way of speaking of preparationism. The notion that there's something prior to the gospel that prepares people for the gospel and is rationalism. When we talk about the history of apologetics, this will make more sense to many of you. But St. Thomas Aquinas said, reason lays the platform for faith. Reason is the fundament upon which faith is founded. And somebody like Schaeffer, who doesn't like Aquinas in many ways, sadly lines up with Aquinas on this point because he thinks that reason lays the foundation, don't you see that? It's pre-evangelism for faith, which is the result of the gospel message or the evangelistic message. Apologetics is not an arrogant exercise in intellectual chess. Apologetics is not intended to establish an area for man's mind to operate on neutral common ground with covenant-breaking sinners. Apologetics is evangelistic in that we want men to repent for their intellectual sins and be right with God, and that's only possible through the cross of Christ. To address another major problem in the 20th century church with respect to apologetics, we need to relate it to ethical living. I've just said that apologetics is not purely intellectual. It's not an exercise in some kind of intellectual chess, but it's a recognition that the person to whom I'm speaking is a covenant breaker. Now, if I'm going to effectively witness to him, I need to be a covenant keeper. If I break covenant with God in order to convince this covenant breaker that we should both keep covenant with God, it makes no sense at all. And that is to say that as I pursue my apologetical task, I must be a demonstration in my own life, in my own conduct, of the gospel. Apologetics involves the witness of our lives as well as the witness of our words. I'd like to believe there was a time when saying this would not have been necessary. It should have been obvious to everybody. But we live in a day and age, sadly, when some of the best academic apologists also have reputations for being wolves socially. They simply cannot get along with people. They do not show graciousness. They are arrogant. They are pushy. They are discourteous. They are unloving, uncharitable. Because this is such a strong indictment, I choose not to use any names here, but when I was in college, there was a particular apologist, an evidential apologist, who was well known as being a public debater. And many people said, having been at the public debate when he had debated with Altizer on the existence of God, he said that this apologist had decimated his opponent, but Altizer won the debate. You say, now how can that be? I'll tell you how it can be. It's because when you have 1,000 college students sitting there seeing a Christian acting like a jackass, they don't really care about the nature of the argument all of a sudden, and they said Altizer at least was a decent human being. Now, we can all go away and run to our logic books and say, oh, that's ad hominem now, you're just talking about the man. But it's not the logic book that I want to run you to. Turn to God's book. What does God's book say about this? Matthew 5, verse 16. Even so, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Which being interpreted is, even so, let the brilliance of your mind so shine before men that they will be awestruck with your arguments and glorify your Father who is in heaven. You notice there isn't any verse in the Bible that's like that? But many Christians think that that's what we're supposed to do, is demonstrate our intellectual ability and superiority. And if you master presuppositional approach, I don't say this with any pride or arrogance, I don't think at all. If you master this approach, you can do it to anybody. You can slice them and dice them. You know, stick with me long enough, I can show you there's not a person out there who will be able to deal with the arguments. But I also know that if you use those arguments with that spirit, with that kind of display, you'll be entirely ineffective. Jesus said Let your light shine before men that they may see your good works. That's what leads them to glorify your Father who is in heaven. It's a good argument coupled with a good conscience, as Peter put it in 1 Peter chapter 3. And so we can't make apologetics completely intellectualistic. I've already indicated that to you, so I won't harp on it much more. But we need to recognize that apologetics is related to ethical living, that our arguments must be in the context of a life that demonstrates truth. We walk in truth and we speak the truth. I'm sure all of you have heard messages and devotions on this one. What happens when you speak the truth but don't walk it? You can talk it, but you don't walk it, and the world is not convinced. And so it's important for apologetics to be part of ethics. It involves the witness of our lives as well as the witness of our words. Speaking of ethics, we might look at Matthew 22, verse 37. Jesus has been challenged with the probing question, which is the greatest of the commandments. And he said unto them, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind. If I'm going to have a good conscience before God, if my good works are going to be a light that appeals to the unbelieving world, if I'm going to please God in the way that I live, I must please him in the way that I think, too. My mind is to demonstrate love for God. Because everybody at some point when they're witnessing and they get involved in apologetics comes to this crucial place where the challenge explicitly or subtly and implicitly is given. Will you show love for Greek philosophy, logic, argumentation, evidence, science, or will you show love for the Lord? And the idea here is, well, if you have love for the Lord, then you've sacrificed your mind and so forth. The Bible says we need to love the Lord our God with our mind. No, I will not prostitute my thinking to this school of philosophy. I will not prostitute my thinking to this scientific point of view. My mind is sold out for Jesus, and I'm not ashamed of that. Probably most of you, at some point in your life, realized what it was to go into a restaurant and bow your head and pray out loud, knowing that people could hear you pray. In California, we have the problem that waitresses come up while we're praying and fill our glasses with water and drop off food and so forth. I mean, we have such a secular culture. But in the midst of that kind of disdain for, or not even comprehension of what's going on, you hesitate, to do that. And you say, well, but God will hear me if I pray quietly. I say, but I want to glorify God in the midst of this restaurant. Not show off, but glorify God. I'm gonna say thank you out loud. In the same way, the time comes in your reasoning with unbelievers that you say, I want to glorify God above science, above logic, above philosophy, and I want the person to know, that's right, I will not go down that line of thinking because I love God. I love him with all my mind. In Colossians 3:10, Paul tells us something about the relationship of apologetics and our minds, the use of our minds, to ethics and renewal when he says, and put on the new man that is being renewed unto knowledge after the image of him that created him. When we become Christians, our minds are renewed, and renewed unto knowledge. The implication is that those who do not have minds that are renewed by God don't have minds that are able to come to knowledge. Okay. So apologetics is related to ethical living. In John 17, verses 21 through 23, Jesus tells us that the world will be convinced that he came from God by the awesome display of intellect in his followers. We get that in your notes as well, an awesome display. That isn't what the Bible says. That doesn't sound right. What is it that's going to convince the world? John 17:21. Look at it with me. That they may all be one, even as thou, Father, art one, art in me, and I in thee, that they also may be in us, that the world may believe that thou didst send me. And the glory which thou hast given me I have given unto them, that they may be one even as we are one, I and them, and thou and me, that they may be perfected into one, that the world may know that thou didst send me, and lovest them even as thou lovest me. I have to be very honest with you. It's not easy to tell you this. But when I give apologetics seminars and conferences and lectures here or there around the United States and sometimes in foreign lands, the question that comes up, probably more than any other one, is, Dr. Bonson, in all of your work in apologetics, what's the hardest criticism to defend? It's not the problem of evil. That's a tough one. Not the problem of miracles, not the problem of the meaningfulness of religious language or the existence of God or the deity of Christ. The toughest thing to answer. In fact, I'm not sure that I've got a good answer. I have something that parries it a bit, but what happens when Christians don't live like Christians? What do you do when your congregation's been through a division? And there's been animosity, and people just haven't been willing to show the fruit of the Spirit and be peaceful and resolve things in a biblical way. What does Jesus say? Jesus says, when the world sees that we're one, then it'll be convinced that I've come from God, and that God has shown his love to these people. But isn't this easy to defend? I say, you see how unloving God's people are? That's the proof that he loves us. That's the proof that he sent his Son, to bring us into a kingdom of love, is that we backbite and we bicker and we really hate each other and we compete with each other, and there's no peace and no desire for it. There's no greater readiness for or ability to achieve reconciliation among Christians. Now, I'm overstating it a bit, but not much. There's not a greater readiness and ability to achieve reconciliation among Christians than I've seen in the unbelieving world. And maybe I've seen particularly bad Christians, particularly good non-Christians.
Please turn the cassette over at this time.
But looking at your faces, I think you all know what I'm talking about. I've worked in an office environment where it was easier to get pagans to put down their hatred of one another and their competition than I've seen in the Christian church or in Christian institutions. What do you do with that? I think that's the toughest thing to answer. I can give the intellectual answers for, why not Hinduism or how come miracles and stuff like that. But when somebody says, yeah, well, if it's true, how come you Christians live the way you do? It's got to be related to ethical living. Apologetics is part of a lifestyle. It's part of evangelism, but it's part of a lifestyle where God has changed our hearts and made us submissive to his word, not just intellectually, but in the whole range of conduct and living and behavior. Okay, what's the relationship of apologetics to other departments or other fields of study? And this question comes up particularly in seminary settings. It's like, well, should you have a department of apologetics? And if you have a department of apologetics, how does it relate to the other departments like systematic theology and biblical studies and church history and practical theology and so forth? What's the relationship of apologetics to the other departments of the curriculum, specifically in a Christian seminary? Well, I believe that in every one of the fields of study, every one of the departments in a seminary curriculum, there is not only a positive statement of the truth of Christianity or what the Old Testament or the New Testament or church history may teach us, but there has to also be a defense of what the Bible is saying at that point. It's really impossible to so abstract biblical study or systematic theology from the world in which we live and the culture that says you can't believe those things, that you cannot do biblical studies, systematic studies, church historical studies without showing the vindication of the Christian worldview along the line. The defense of the faith cannot be left entirely to a department of apologetics. everybody's got to do apologetics. Now, you would have anticipated I'd say this, because earlier today I think I convinced you that everybody's got to do apologetics, right? Well, if everybody's got to do apologetics, then New Testament professors have to do apologetics too, right? Theologians have to do apologetics. Church historians have to do apologetics. People who teach practical theology, often it isn't very practical, but nevertheless they say that they teach practical theology. It isn't practical to not have a defense of your faith. Every department needs to engage in the defense of the faith and not leave it to, quote unquote, the experts in the apologetics department. The specific truths of Christianity and the specific lifestyle of the Christian must be defended as they are stated and presented by any professor, any teacher, any pastor, any Christian. Not one of these truths of Christianity, not one of the aspects of Christian ethics has been left unattacked in our day and age. And therefore, those who are experts in these various fields will best be prepared to undertake the defense of the faith when it comes to this or that issue. And so I fully expect that my colleagues who emphasize Old Testament teaching should be in a better position to deal with the documentary hypothesis than I am. So there's nothing wrong with that. Now, I know how to deal with the documentary hypothesis, but the point is they teach Old Testament. That comes to bear specifically in that field, and they ought to do apologetics. They shouldn't say, oh, well, in the apologetics department, you'll learn how to do this. No, they've got to do apologetics right then and there. Well, then, is there a place for apologetics as a separate department? Well, I'm going to go the other direction now and tell you, I think it's deplorable when you have a theological curriculum and there's no separate course in apologetics. I just said everybody's got to do apologetics. But on the board earlier this morning, first thing I put down